Hello and welcome to the Advanced Age Role Playing Games podcast. I'm Nathan. I'm your host today. We are down one co-host. Matt is decided he needed a real vacation and can't be with us. But I do have Tomas Härenstam with us from Free League. But first off, if you haven't checked out our show before, just so you know, we have quite a bit of Free League content. We've got actual plays featuring 2 stories with Alien, Twilight 2000. Well, we're currently running Dragonbane, and that's ongoing for probably for the next year. And we've even done Stockholm Cartel's Death in Space. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, please check us out. We've also done a bunch of interviews. We've talked to Thomas a few times. We've done interviews with the folks behind Coriolis and Alien and Forbidden Land. So a lot of content here for you if you like Free League content. So that's my pitch. Thomas, great to see you again. How's it going?
Thank you. You too. Yeah, it's going good. I'm working from home today, as you might see behind me.
Yeah.
Had to rush home to take care of cats, but it's all good.
I have to close my door so that the cats don't come in and start chewing on my cables because they find them delicious.
Yeah.
But thanks for making some time to talk to us. You're super busy right now with the Bladerunner Replicant Rebellion Kickstarter. But how many days are left in that?
It's 2 weeks pretty much to the day, right? It ends Thursday. Today is Thursday, the 30th of May, and then when we're recording this anyway, and then it ends on the June 13th. So 2 weeks from now.
So anyway, I skipped something. So Thomas, why don't you? I have a feeling that most people watching this probably know who you are, but just for the sake of covering that off, why don't you do a quick introduction of yourself and what you do at Free League?
Yeah, sure. I'm one of the 4 original founders of Free League back in 2011, and we're a few more now. But yeah. So, and I've been designing games. I've sort of in a role where I try to keep things together overall as well. So. Managing things, so that's also part of what I do, but most of my time is dedicated to creating games and running Kickstarters and everything that goes along with game publishing. So that's what I do.
The first time we talked to you was actually for the to you personally was for the original Blade Runner Kickstarter, which I got mine here. And we talked a bit already about your history with gaming and how you started out. So if you're interested in that, go back and watch that interview. But there's a really charming story at the front of this book that we didn't get out of you when we talked to you that first time. And it's really awesome. It's about a VHS tape. Can you just go over that for the listeners? Because I think I love that kind of stuff. Just it brings a kind of personal touch to the games that we make.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of our games are these are passion projects for us, all of them. But I think Blade Runner specifically has like a kind of a special place for me, and that goes back to when I first saw the film, and that was in the 80s. It was not right as it came out in like 82. This was a few years later. Mm-hmm. And I was 15 maybe or something like that, around that time, 14 maybe, I don't know. And so I had an uncle he's about 10 years older, 15 maybe, so he was 20 plus years, and he had been to England and been recording lots of because back then obviously there was very hard to find anything cool on TV, especially in Sweden that had only 2 channels, had TV1 and TV2, and there was hardly ever anything exciting on those channels. So when he came back, he had a bunch of VHS tapes that he had kind of taped off of British television, and they had then been. And so he kind of shared, or he loaned me me and my brother, who is 3 years older, a few tapes. And one of those VHS tapes had Blade Runner, and it also had Repo Man, I think, was the other one.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so that tape was that was kind of interesting. Yeah, so that was the first time I watched Blade Runner, and I was completely kind of blown away by the whole thing. I was just couldn't imagine film could be anything like this, and I probably missed a lot of the finer points of it since I was like 14, but it made a huge impression. So such a huge impression that I actually don't think I ever got around to watching the other film on the tape because this was so I never actually saw Repo Man. So because I just kept watching Blade Runner over and over again. And a funny little detail is this was taped off of television, and I guess back then, and maybe also still, I don't know, you couldn't swear, I guess, on
Right. Yeah.
TV. So they had bleeped out some of the words, especially when Roy Batty kills Eldon Tyrell. So I didn't know what he was. I never kind of learned what he actually told him because the film went quiet when he said that. So that took many years later when I actually saw an uncensored version of the film. So that
Oh.
was kind of interesting. So yeah, but and I still have that the old VHS tape, one of those kind of uh, heirlooms from way back that I just saved because it had like meaning. So I still have that of VHS tape. I'm not sure if it works. I don't even have a VHS player anymore, but still have that thing. And it's kind of just a testament to the kind of impression that Blade Runner, the original film, kind of had on me back then, and I guess that kind of continued over to the RPG today, and now the new expansion as well.
That's great. I think we all, when we're kids like that, we all we're like sponges, and we
Yeah,
just
definitely.
there, something really strikes us, and it sticks with us. So for me, it was Star Wars, the original one.
Yeah.
That's really kind of guided what I thought my original career was going to be,
Yeah.
which didn't quite work out. But yeah, so those things really affect us, and they stick with us. They never leave. We never get tired of our first love. So
Yeah.
that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. I just thought I read that. I was like, wow, that's such a cool story.
Thank you.
So Replicant Rebellion is an expansion for the first Blade Runner game. And it's not standalone, correct? It's
That's right. It's a pretty hefty expansion, and it does have additional rules and archetypes and things, but it is not fully standalone. So you would need the core book to play it, to use it, or possibly you could probably manage with the starter set rules. But ideally, you'd have the Blade Runner RPG core book to go with it.
Okay. So why do this expansion from the point of view of the rebellion?
Right. I think we had this idea very early on because one of the first discussions we had when we started designing the RPG in the first place was that, okay, so who do you actually play in this game? And the question kind of became, okay, it makes perfect sense considering the films and everything that you would play a Blade Runner. That felt like the obvious starting point. But there was always a sense that there was a lot more in this world as well. So you could potentially play many other types of characters. But so that's kind of when the idea was born, that you could also do other things. But we decided on actually focusing the core game on playing Blade Runners because that also feeds into the whole structure of the game with investigations and case files and all of that. So that kind of became a clear focus for the game rather than just have a game where you just have the rules over here and the world over here and just do anything you want. That's not really how we design games. We want to have rules that really complement the theme and the types of stories you want to tell. And that meant focusing on Blade Runners, doing case files and facing those choices, those moral choices. That's what we felt the core game should be. But already back then we had the idea that it would be very cool to also flip the script pretty much on the whole concept. And the obvious choice then would be to play the other side. I mean, I think many people who see all the Blade Runner films, or both of them, I think you can emphasize a lot with replicants who are actually the ones being hunted. even though they do some bad things too, especially in the first film. But in the end, you still have a lot of sympathy for the replicants. You can certainly see their plight. You can identify with them, and to some extent, you might even argue that they are the good guys of the story. So and then the concept of a replicant underground was pretty clearly established in Blade Runner 2049. And we felt that is a very, very cool idea and concept to build upon and create another approach to the universe and to the RPG. So that's what we wanted to do, and not only in terms of who you play, but also how you play. In that, it's no longer searching for clues and solving cases. It's rather about doing operations. You're actually doing things like sabotage or espionage or things like that, while maintaining your cover because you're constantly hunted by Blade Runners or others, and that also opened up the game to another type of gameplay. So that was also being able to play another type of character in another type of gameplay. And also a third point is that the case files that we produce for the core game they're pretty complicated to construct for a game runner. I mean, it requires quite a bit of work, and which is fun. It's fun work. But we also felt that the game could benefit from having a bit of a faster, easier format also. So the operations that you will be doing in Replicant Rebellion are a bit shorter, more suitable for one-shots, easier to kind of improvise around. So we felt that was also a third point, that it might open the game up to another style of game that requires less prep, which is good to have as an option. It's not like it replaces the original type of play. It just gives another way of playing the game and approaching the game. So that was kind of so we had a few different reasons for doing this, and that's been kind of around ever since we did the game from the very beginning.
You touched on a bunch of things I wanted to ask you about. First thing I want to kind of dive a little deeper on are the themes. So you touched on the moral conflict and soul searching, that kind of thing. So those are there's 5 key themes from the original story: sci-fi action, character drama, corporate intrigue, moral conflict, and soul searching. Are there a similar set of themes set for this new expansion?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting thing. I think we identify in this book also a couple of key themes. Some of them are actually are the same, because there was still like sci-fi action that's still there for sure, and there is definitely room for intrigue, things like that. But then we felt we also needed to modify some of the other themes a little bit, so they're not exactly the same. We have sci-fi action in this new one, character drama, political intrigue, slightly different, moral conflict still there, but then we also added defiance as like the third key theme, because that's kind of the whole thing about the rebellion, is the kind of the playing rebels, defying authority. So it's a kind of a very different feel. That theme comes in you can do that in the core game as well, because as a Blade Runner you can refuse orders, and you might quite often do that, and you're kind of always on that brink of whether do as you're told or do what you feel is right, and that balance is very much part of the core Blade Runner game. Difference here is that it's not the same balance, really. You're all in rebellion mode, so it's in that sense less ambiguous, a little bit more black and white maybe, while still, of course, there will be moral issues, but still it's a bit clear that you're doing this and this is your cause, and you're pretty much prepared to go any distance to do it. So the defiance is like a new theme that we've added on to kind of focus the game on that a bit more. So that means we wanted to kind of clarify that difference compared to playing like the normal mode, so to say.
Okay, great. So the second thing, so you talked about the case files and how they're a bit of work to come up with a new one, and you do have the Fiery Angels case files expansion available for it. So there's other published material out there. What do I want to ask about that? So it is kind of complicated, and I've kind of been brainstorming a bit because one of my friends, one of our players, Tony, is a huge Harrison Ford fan. So like anything tangentially related to Harrison Ford, he's just all over it. And we looked at this and we want to play it, but we have sometimes 6 or 7 players, and to us that seemed like a kind of a stretch. It's a stretch with any kind of RPG to have that many players, but we like to have all our friends that we can grab and bring in. But it seemed to be for the style of a case file and the structure that's laid out for it, it seemed to be kind of a tall ask to have that many players go through that. So having this more, a looser structure, I think might help us kind of dive into this and tell a story in the Blade Runner universe. So that's not so much of a question, but do you have any thoughts on that?
No, yeah, definitely. I think that relates to what I was mentioning there about perhaps a little bit easier approach. That's another part of the case file structure. I mean, we love that. I'm writing that 3rd case file now, and I really enjoy that format. But it does, apart from being development or kind of heavy, it also lends itself better to smaller groups. I think we state clearly that 4 is really, it's not really designed to be more than 4 players.
Yeah.
And I think ideally maybe 3, so being 5 or 6 players, it doesn't quite work as well to be that many Blade Runners running around.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It just doesn't really feel right. I mean, the way we set it up with 3 or 4, you can split up, which is fine. So that's kind of actually the way the game is structured. It actually encourages splitting the party. And that works fine, but still even then, if you're 5 or 6 players, that becomes a stretch. So, But as in Replicant Rebellion, it's easier to imagine like a crew of replicant rebels doing an operation. It becomes more of a cyberpunky thing, I guess, and that's also easier to do in larger groups as well. So I think that's also a way to open up the game to a bigger groups as well. So that's definitely another benefit of adding this game mode.
Yeah. You talk about splitting the party. Is that still something you talk about in Replicant Rebellion? Is it more of a standard kind of keep everybody together type situation?
You mean in Replicant Rebellion?
Yeah.
I think definitely there is room for splitting the party as well, but since it might be less of a thing, I would say, since also operations are at least typically designed to be a bit shorter. And more focused on you might not move around in that many different locations. It might be a bit more location focused. I mean, in the sense of having fewer locations where the action takes place. So I think there would probably be less reason to split the party, but it definitely could happen from time to time.
And to follow up on that, when I first started kind of reading through the notes on the Kickstarter page, the first thing that came up to my mind was something I don't have a ton of experience with, but I've done a couple times, but more of tournament play that you see at conventions where you have like opposing groups working together to come to like a final conclusion. So I can imagine that it might be fun to have, if you're in that kind of game, is to have one group running replicants, one running Blade Runners, and have like an overarching story where they leads to a conflict at the finale.
Definitely, you can play. I think you can have a lot of fun with this. Like you said, having like running 2 groups, one replicants, one Blade Runners, and having them meet each other at some point. I mean, that takes some logistics to get.
I
think it definitely could be fun. And also just another way that you could use this is because in the regular game you can definitely have Blade Runners who quit, who go rogue, leave the RDU and turn to help the rebellion, the underground. So, and using this, you could kind of continue playing. You could even have a story where you keep playing the regular game with some characters, and then one character or two might go to the sort of turn to the other side, and they could continue. You could have it like a combined campaign. That would take a little bit of tinkering and work,
Right,
but it
right, right.
definitely could be done, and I think it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking you're talking about flipping things on their head. As you have the secret replicant in the core rule book, but have maybe a secret Blade Runner in the replicant group.
Exactly.
Has that been talked about in the book, or is that just?
It is discussed in the book. Yeah, I mean specifically, there will be a section. It's largely written about embeds, and that's basically you have a trader type character who's actually infiltrated the underground, but it's actually working for the Blade Runners or the RDU or for
Okay.
and like an infiltrator. So that will be discussed at some length, how to play a character like that. Yes, and then you can also have on the flip side, you could potentially have, that's also mentioned, how you can carry a character over from the regular game to the underground if you have a Blade Runner who changes sides. You could create a Blade Runner who is originally I mean, in Replicant Rebellion, you can actually create a Blade Runner character who is has a cover of still being a Blade Runner, but actually works for the Underground. So that's like
okay.
the opposite way of
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
it. But also,
yeah.
and both of these things are discussed and covered in the book. Yeah.
That sounds great. So, I'm excited. So we were touched on archetypes a little bit. I mentioned that's an archetype that you're talking about with the undercover.
That was actually, the original idea was that the embed would be an archetype. But then we realized that doesn't really work because, of course, the embed needs to be secret from the, at least that's the way we designed it now, secret from the other players. So you have to have a cover archetype, because otherwise, obviously, if your archetype is the embed, they would immediately know. That so that would kind of give away that
point. Yeah.
So that's why it's actually not an archetype as such. You need to have another archetype, which is your cover, and then this would be kind of another layer to the character.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Having played a lot of Vampire and other games, there's always one player that wants to be the bad guy. So
yeah. Here you can definitely do that. It does require a bit of work, and of course you need to kind of juggle that as a game runner as well. But I think it can definitely be done. So
so I guess I brought up archetypes. What are some of a couple of your favorite archetypes that have been created for this so far?
For this one, there's a couple of cool ones that I think are could be a lot of fun. We had one. I mean, there is. I mean, the tank obviously is kind of a heavy hitter type character. There is the doctor, which is a kind of a tech person, kind of hacker type, which is, I think, can be fun. There is the powder keg, which is a kind of an explosive, crazy, rebel person, which I think also will be enjoyable, and a couple of more. So I think we'll see how many we actually end up having. It would probably be something like 5 or 6, I guess, at least.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Powder keg sounds right up my alley.
Yeah.
Little explosions create a lot of chaos. Now, let's talk about maybe go a little bit deeper about case files versus operations and how they different. Like, what's the general layout and build of an operation?
It is a little bit more. It's in a sense a little bit similar to a case file, but it has, since you won't be normally at least searching for clues in the same sense, it has a bit of a different structure. It also has the kind of maps. You see similar maps of the locations that you have in the case files. You will also have a kind of, at least most of the time, kind of a countdown or a timer, which is similar to the case files as well. But instead of you have to kind of solve the case in time, you have to kind of complete the operation in time, and that could be any number of different things. The idea is they are generally a bit shorter in length. We intend to include, let me see that I get this right. and a few of them, yeah, we unlocked
I think it's
one
3.
bonus, so we have now planned for 5. So
Oh,
you'll
5.
actually have
Okay.
5 operations ready to play in the book. So
Okay.
obviously they can't be as long as a case file because those can be easily be 50, 60 pages each one. So then I would assume a typical operation might be 5 to 10 pages, maybe. I'm just kind of
Okay.
pulling that. We haven't done the layout yet, but just
Yeah.
typically something like that. So you would see they're a bit more shorter in format, a bit more immediate, and that's also kind of in the intention that they are more of a pick up and play friendly thing.
And you talked
Uh,
about sabotage being kind of one of the
yeah, it can be
opera.
that. Can
Well,
be like
like what
rescue
other?
operations. It can even be more like, could even be, kidnapping or even assassination attempts, possibly,
Mm,
depends.
yeah.
It could be saving someone from who's in custody or breaking somebody out of somewhere. It can be finding information. It could be, yeah, any number of there's a wild, massive variety of things that an operation could be about, but it will usually, in one way or another, of course, relate to the replicant industry and the replicant underground. You don't have to play a replicant. We get that question a lot. You can definitely play a human because there are, in this setting, definitely many humans involved in the replicant underground, kind of helping replicants. So that's fully possible to play a human character in this setting as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. I kind of took that for granted, but I'm sure there's folks that ask that if you can play
Yeah.
a regular human. Now, there's quite a few new things. So I saw something about heat.
Yeah.
And can you go into some of the new mechanics like heat?
Yeah, definitely. That's a thing we kind of considered. It has a little bit of similarity to the threat meter and the threat system in the Walking Dead RPG,
Yep.
but different, of course. But the idea is generally that you will have a number, kind of on a meter that you can actually, like a dial you can turn. I think it's from 1 to 6, just
Hmm.
giving a general kind of feel for how close the law is on your tail, basically. So the
Okay.
higher the heat, the closer they are to blowing your cover and arresting you or knock on your door, basically. And I think this is a cool thing because it for one, it's a very clear signal to the players. They know now that he is really on, and then they have to be very careful. And anywhere they turn, there could be someone out after them. Whereas
Mm.
when the heat is low, they can relax a bit more and play. So it kind of informs the gameplay, and it also will give tools to the game runner. So when you have a different type of random encounters, things like that, that will happen if the heat is high. Certain things will happen if the heat is low. Other things will happen, and will kind of that will affect what kind of events to spring on the characters. I think it's going to be a real help to kind of to run the game as well, just to have that. And it underscores the point that the heat is always on. You're never, as a rebel, you will never be completely relaxed. There
Yeah.
is never a completely safe space, but it's just that the heat is always somewhere on the scale. It's never zero. It's always like any somewhere on that scale. So which is, I think, is underscores the point really well too.
That's a nice lever, I think, for the game runner to be able
Hmm.
to, because sometimes the game can slow down a little bit when players like, okay, I just need to rest and put my feet up for a little bit and and if you really want to move the game forward, I can see injecting some heat, some pressure, and force them to make a choose another path and more quickly, and that's kind of when people can maybe not make the safest move, which can cause more conflict. And I like that kind of system. One of my friends played Walking Dead at PAX Unplugged and really loved the threat meter and some of the other pieces. That's great.
Hmm.
Now, are there any changes to like the chase mechanics from the original book or?
No, at least not as far as we're thinking now. I mean, the book is
Hmm.
still being under development, but we're like the core, like combat chases, things like that. We will likely it will likely stay pretty much untouched. We might possibly add some additional chase encounters, maybe to kind of flesh out that bit a bit more, give some more variety. But that's pretty much as far as it goes. The mechanics as such, I think we're happy with, and they fit
Okay.
the Rebellion just as well as they do Blade Runner. So we don't really see any reason to change that.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering because you're changing the being from the being the hunter to the hunted. So
Mhm.
yeah, I was kind of
That's true.
curious
Yeah,
about
but
that.
yeah, the rules should work in both
Either
directions.
way.
So, yeah,
Okay. All right. I'll take your word for it.
yeah.
Are there any other changes to the? Because I see with things like some of the point systems, like promotion
Mhm.
is there a different
Yeah,
analog to
that's
that?
right. I mean, in the core game, you have promotion points and humanity points, and they are kind of weighed against each other. You get them sometimes. If you do A, you get a promotion point, but if you do B, you get a humanity point. So kind of a choice. But
Right.
you do need both types of points, and that kind of underscores the way a Blade Runner has to balance that thing. You kind of have to do your duty to some extent, but you also kind of to develop your character, you also have to do the human thing. So you have to kind of balance that also mechanically. That's not really the same in the Replicant Rebellion side, so it will not work the same. You will have
Hmm.
another type of point. We're still not 100% decided on what to call it. We have some ideas,
Okay.
but anyway. So there will be a different type of advancement point that you will get for doing things. You won't have the because there is no equivalent to like promotion in the rebellion. You're not a rebel in the underground to get promoted. It's not really what
Right.
you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really make sense to have
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So instead, you have a different type of advancement point. It will work similarly. You will still use them to increase skill levels and gain new talents, things like that. But you will get those points for it's not they will have a different name, and you will get them for different types of actions. So
Okay.
it's kind of a change of that mechanic. It's not a completely different, it just works a bit differently.
Okay.
Also, I could mention that another change or addition is that we'll add more talents, because the talents that we have in the core game are, at least quite a few of them, are very focused on investigation type gameplay.
Hmm.
We want to add some more that have different functions. So we'll add new talents to the game as well. There will be new gear, new items. So there'll be some of that. But that doesn't really change the rules. It's just kind of adding more stuff to the game.
Yeah. I think a lot of people like new gear and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and new
That always,
talents.
yeah,
Yeah, that's always fun stuff to add
yeah.
and mix up. And imagine some of them would be kind of backwards compatible with the original rules, and some of them were
Mhm.
really are kind of specifically flavored for the rebellion
Yeah,
type player. So another new thing I saw with the Kickstarter is the asset pack.
yeah,
So what
yeah.
what makes up the asset pack?
Yeah, the asset pack is kind of something we've been thinking about for a while. It's in a sense unrelated to Replicant Rebellion. It's a standalone thing, but we think they work well together. So we and they can definitely be used together. So we that's why we are including them in the same Kickstarter.
Hmm.
And the asset pack is basically a bunch of physical handouts. It's like maps, handouts, newspaper clippings, NPC cards, all kinds. But they're not connected to a specific case file or operation. Instead, they're more general in nature, and the idea is that you can use them as a game runner to create your own case files. Instead of create the case file and then make the handouts, you have the handouts, and then you kind of backwards, they will engineer a
Yeah.
case file from them in different ways. So, for example, the newspaper front cover will have lots of little stories about things, and you can basically take an idea that's on one of those newspapers and just build that into an actual, so that it becomes a handout for that case file. So you can kind of, and the same thing with maps, you'll have generic location maps. So you can just, oh, here's a map of I don't know, a nightclub or something else. You can kind of, okay, so I'll build a case file where this location is kind of a key
Mm.
place. And the NPC cards, they will be unnamed. So you can basically take, okay, I'll use this card and that card, and those will be these characters that I will have in my case file. So
Okay.
the idea is that you can build case files using these assets. And also you can also build operations, although operations are a bit easier, they're less complex, but you can also use these assets to create especially maps, because the location maps will be used in operations as well. So you can definitely use the asset pack maps to create operations also. That's kind of the core idea of that. Then we're also now as a stretch goal that we hope to unlock. We have two things that we're hoping to add. One is cardboard standees. They can actually, and that kind of helps. It's kind of cool to have little standees for the characters on the maps. So you can that will kind of help combat, which is kind of nice. And then we're also hoping to add to the asset pack actually a solo mode. That's kind of exciting too, because that's something that's been kind of growing, and a lot of players
Yeah.
really enjoy is actually the opportunity to play solo when you can't get your group together or just for fun, and it's a great way to and experience the game. And we have that in a couple of other games, and we want to add that to
Mhm.
Blade Runner as well. I think if Blade Runner really works conceptually for solo players. It's I mean the films and so on are focused on like
It's
the one
solo
Blade
mode,
Runner,
basically.
so it's kind of
Yeah.
a solo concept. So we think
Yeah.
that works well. So that's something it's not done yet. It's still a stretch goal and not unlocked. So we're still working towards that, and it's not written yet, but we definitely have some solid ideas for how to do it. So that's another thing, and that will be in the asset pack. That's the plan, because you might require a couple of different extra
Okay.
tools and things. So.
Yeah. So if you want solo mode, go back to the Kickstarter.
Exactly.
That
Yes.
solo mode is a lot more popular than I would have ever thought. Would be
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's kind of a foreign concept to me. I'm not gonna bash it. Like I for me, role playing game is something you do with your friends. So but they're popular, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of great indie creators creating solo games now. So I mean it's great that you're kind of listening to the audience.
Yeah.
And I was kind of wondering too. So I like the idea of an asset pack that has all these maps and newspaper clippings and things like that. Kind of embed you in the world. I was kind of trying to think of a way that didn't involve AI to kind of do some of that on your own. If there's a way to make a digital asset pack that has kind of the format
Yeah.
of
We have some ideas
newspaper
on that.
clippings.
Yeah. We might, if we can, it might be a future stretch goal. We'll see, to add like beyond the physical handouts, also have like a digital asset pack that is not only the same handouts in digital form, but also like more like templates, like
Yeah, that's what I was
like the
thinking. So
newspaper, like front page, like a
you
template
just
for that.
blank that you can fill
They
out
can
and
fill in with text, but you will have
yep.
the layout. I mean, that's
Mhm.
something we're looking into, and that we mimight add that as a digital companion to the asset pack. Yeah,
I think I vote for that.
yeah,
I think that would be great. I think that would because there's a lot of people that are very good with story, but maybe not so great with like layout and graphics and all of that. So I think
yeah,
that would be
yeah,
nice.
sure. Yeah, so that's on our mind. So I think, and I hope we can do that too.
So speaking of, I didn't even plan this, but speaking of layout and graphics, I saw Johan Norse touch
Yeah,
on some of the graphics in the release there. So it was just like instantly recognizable. For those of you who don't know, Johan Norse is one of the mad geniuses behind Merc Borg. It looks like he's doing a little bit more than just the graphics and layout. Can you talk a little bit about what he's doing, bringing to the project?
yeah, we felt. I mean, we worked with him. Of course, he does his own stuff, but we worked with him for a couple of things, and we just felt that for Replicant Rebellion, because that kind of style that he has, especially well in Morkborg, but even more maybe in Cyborg, kind of this
Mm.
kind of very punky, rebellious style, it kind of really ties in really well to the feeling we want for Replicant Rebellion. So the idea we had was to have him design. Now it's three, I think, spreads in the core book. So it'll be two spreads that are kind of like like a fanzine type underground publication thing. And then one spread which is basically graffiti, like replicant graffiti, basically on a
Yeah.
spread in the book. So that's actually what we asked him to do, and he did, and I think it came out beautifully. So that will be in the book, those 3 spreads, and of course, that's also visible on the Kickstarter page. You can see those
Yeah.
spreads, at least 2 of them, maybe all 3. And
I guess so too. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think that adds a nice touch, because that underscores again kind of the difference. I mean, overall, the graphic design follows the same format as the core book, as it should. I mean, we want to continue that overall style, but then these kind of break the mold. Those 3 spreads that look completely different. They're like taken from, directly from the underground, and kind of just inject that attitude that we want to give to this book and this theme. So I think he did a great job. We'll see. He might do something more for this book as well. We'll see about that. We're talking to him now about this, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think his touch and anything brings a bit of rebellion to it. So I just love his style. So yeah. And the last thing I really had, well, I guess a couple more things. So one is, are you exploring any other locations in the future besides outside of LA?
Yeah, we did consider this. So yeah, to some extent, I think our overall kind of position is that the Los Angeles of Blade Runner is such a huge and inspiring world in itself, that we feel there is so much there to do and explore, that we don't really need to go to another city or somewhere else necessarily to the game. It has plenty to do in that huge city. But that said, we are looking into doing some things in other areas. I won't go into kind of spoiler territory, but there's definitely things on the outskirts. There's things that will, at least not be perhaps, downtown. It will definitely be other areas, but I don't think we'll do like the New York book or something like that. I don't think that would really make sense. I think Blade Runner is so interconnected. It kind of, it's part of the identity, I think, of the whole world, to have the focus on that version of Los Angeles. It's not really real Los Angeles, obviously, but like a neo-noir fantasy version. So I think that to some extent that is the setting of the game. So I think we don't want to move away too far from that. But in smaller portions, yes, but not like we'll move the whole game to somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah. Too much of there'd be a lot of rebuilding and whatnot. When I had Nils and Costa on for Coriolis, I asked them this too. Is there going to be like an overarching story that you'll be following that starts in the book that you'll be using and adding to for supplements? Is there like an end goal?
Yeah,
for
we
the
do
story?
have something called, I mean, in the case files for the normal version of the game, we have these case files. The Electric Dreams is the first one in the starter set, and then Fiery Angels that was recently released, and we are working on the part 3. And they are standalone, but they do form like a longer narrative that we call the Immortal Game. So the Immortal Game is like a longer campaign arc. And the idea is, so these case files will tie together. We'll see if it becomes like 3, 4, 5 that kind of complete that longer arc. That's not really decided, but at least 3, I would say probably 4 or 5 case files that tie together. So then there will be pretty long, pretty cool overarching story that you'll follow. But you don't need necessarily to play every part of it. But if you do want to play them, you should probably play them in the order of release.
Right.
Yeah, but they're standalone in the sense that you don't need to play them all, and you can do it with different characters. That doesn't really matter. But they will form a longer story arc as we complete it. So that's definitely there.
last question I have is, are there any other contributing designers to the project that you'd like to give them a shout out?
Yeah, definitely. I should have done that at the get-go. I mean, primarily for Replicant Rebellion, the lead writer on the setting side and the sort of scenario side is Joe LaFavi. He did the setting work for the core book as well. He did an amazing job, and he's done the same for this one. So that Replicant Rebellion is to a very large extent, he's the lead. It's the lead writer on it, definitely. My job is to kind of tie it together in terms of rules, scenarios, and get it all to make work at the gaming table. I'll also be part of writing the operations in the core book with Joe. But yeah, definitely, he's done a lot of the heavy lifting up until now. Could also mention in terms of art, of course, you mentioned Johan Noor. We have the Martin Griep who did most of the art in the core book. He did the cover for this one, but the other new art in the book is done by a new illustrator that we work with called Aaron Arik. He's a really talented guy, so I think he brings a lot of cool stuff to the book as well.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. I think there's a lot of folks, a lot of work that goes into making these games, especially with the kind of the artistic bent that Free League takes on all the products that you touch. So I think it's good to give those folks some credit.
Yeah,
I think I've exhausted my list of questions that I wanted to ask you in my side rants. Do you have anything else that you think folks should know about this product?
I don't know. I think most of it, we covered a lot of stuff. Well, you can also find more information on the Kickstarter page itself, and of course, check it out before it ends on June 13th.
Awesome. Well, Tomas, thanks again so much for spending some time with me today. Sure. I will be seeing you at Gen Con, I hope.
Yep,
maybe.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay. I'll track you down. But thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.